What if the most powerful being in the universe was watching you right now? Not a camera, not a drone, not some government satellite. A god, an immortal, an emperor who had lived for 10,000 years. A being so powerful that entire galaxies bent to his will. And he was watching a regular man. A mechanic. A guy with grease on his hands and a cheap cup of coffee going cold on his workbench. The man had no idea. He was just trying to fix a broken toy. But that one moment, that single quiet act of kindness, was about to rewrite everything. Tonight, you are going to discover 3 things that will stay with you long after this video ends. You will discover why the most powerful emperor in the known universe had never truly understood humans until that day. You will discover what a child's broken toy revealed about the human soul. And you will discover the decision the emperor made in secret, a decision that changed the fate of an entire species. Let me show you exactly how this happened. His name was Caleb Harris, 34 years old, born in Manchester, England, moved to the United States when he was 19 with a single bag, $70, and a dream that had nothing to do with being famous or rich or powerful. Caleb just wanted to fix things. That was it. That was the whole dream. When other kids were talking about becoming astronauts or presidents, young Caleb was in his grandfather's garage in the north of England, learning how gears worked, learning why engines hummed, learning that broken things were not dead things. They just needed someone who cared enough to look closer. His grandfather used to say something that Caleb never forgot. A man who fixes what others throw away, that man understands the real value of this world. Caleb carried those words with him across the Atlantic Ocean. He carried them through 2 years of community college in Ohio. He carried them through the early years of struggling to pay rent in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon, where he set up his first real workshop in a rented garage space that smelled like old motor oil and rust. By the time our story begins, Caleb had built himself a small but respected repair business. He called it Harris Hands. No fancy logo, no slick website, just a handwritten sign in the window and a reputation that spread purely by word of mouth. He could fix almost anything. Clocks, engines, electronics, old radios from the 1940s that nobody else would touch, children's toys, kitchen appliances. If it was broken and if it had moving parts, Caleb would sit with it for as long as it took. His regulars loved him. But here is the thing about Caleb Harris that mattered most. The thing that set him apart from every other repair technician in the city. He never turned a child away. Not once. Not ever. If a kid came through that door holding something broken, tears in their eyes, some beloved toy that had stopped working, Caleb stopped everything. It did not matter how busy he was. It did not matter what other job was on his bench. He would look at that child, get down on one knee so he was at their eye level, and say the same thing every single time. Let me take a look. I think we can save it. And almost always, he could. This reputation had spread far beyond Portland, far beyond Oregon, far beyond Earth. Actually, though Caleb had absolutely no idea about that part. Because the city of Portland in the year our story takes place was not quite the same Portland that you might picture today. It was Portland in a time when humanity had made first contact with several alien civilizations, when human cities existed alongside small alien communities, when a person could walk down a street and pass beings from 4 different star systems without blinking twice. Most humans had adjusted. Mostly. There were still tensions, still misunderstandings, still moments where the old fear of the unknown flared up between species. But in general, in most cities, life had found a kind of rhythm. Alien families lived in human neighborhoods. Human kids went to school alongside young beings from distant worlds. Businesses served customers of every species. And repair shops like Harris Hands served everyone. Caleb had fixed alien tech before. Nothing too advanced. Mostly everyday items. A translation device belonging to a Velthari family down the street. A hover scooter owned by a young Saurian boy who had crashed it into a fire hydrant. Small things. Practical things. He never made a big deal of it. He just fixed what needed fixing and charged a fair price. On a Tuesday morning in late October, the door to Harris Hands opened with the familiar bell chime that Caleb had installed above the entrance. He was deep under the hood of a vintage 1967 Mustang engine that a collector had brought in for restoration. He did not look up immediately. "Be with you in a second," he called out. There was no answer. Just a small sound. A sound that made Caleb set down his wrench immediately and turn around. It was crying. Not loud crying. Not the dramatic wailing of a child throwing a tantrum. This was quieter than that. Softer. The kind of crying that comes from genuine heartbreak. The kind that a child makes when something they love has been lost, and they do not know if it can ever come back. Caleb turned around. Standing just inside the doorway of his workshop was the smallest being he had ever seen. She was a dragon hatchling. She could not have been more than 3 years old in dragon years, which Caleb understood meant she was very young indeed. She stood about 2.5 feet tall. Her scales were the color of warm gold, catching the workshop light and throwing tiny reflections across the walls. Her wings were folded tight against her small body, the way a child wraps their own arms around themselves when they are scared. Her eyes large, luminous, the deep amber color of honey held up to sunlight, were filled with tears. In her hands, she clutched something. Caleb moved closer slowly, the way he always did with young visitors, making himself smaller, less threatening. He got down on one knee on the workshop floor without hesitation. The hatchling flinched slightly, then held her ground. In her trembling claws, she was holding a mechanical dragon toy. It was extraordinary craftsmanship. Even broken as it was, Caleb could see that immediately. The toy was constructed from some kind of golden alloy that he had never personally worked with before. Its wings were articulated, designed to actually move and flap. Its eyes were tiny gemstones that likely lit up when the mechanism was functioning. Its tail was jointed in at least 12 separate places, each one designed to create fluid, lifelike movement. It was easily the most sophisticated toy he had ever seen. And it was clearly very broken. One wing had snapped at the primary joint. The tail mechanism had seized completely. Several of the small gear connections along the spine were visibly misaligned. Whatever had happened to this toy, it had taken some serious damage. The little hatchling held it out toward Caleb with both hands. She did not speak. Her species, the Orath, Caleb recognized the golden scale pattern from a community pamphlet the city had distributed the previous year, communicated primarily through a complex musical tone language in early childhood. She was too young for the translation implants that adult Orath used in human cities. But she did not need words. Her eyes said everything. Please. Please fix it. Please. Caleb looked at the broken toy. He looked at the hatchling's face. He looked back at the toy. Then he did what he always did. "Let me take a look," he said gently. "I think we can save it." He took the toy carefully from her small claws and carried it to his main workbench under the bright examination lights. The hatchling followed him, staying close, her golden tail curling and uncurling nervously behind her. Caleb examined the toy for several minutes in silence. He turned it over carefully. He tested the seized mechanism gently with a small probe. He examined the broken wing joint under his magnifying glass. Then he opened his drawer of micro-tools. These were the tools he used for the finest, most delicate work. Instruments so small that most people would mistake them for surgical equipment. Tools he had spent years collecting and years learning to use with precision. He got to work. And here is what nobody in that workshop knew. What nobody on that entire street knew. What nobody in Portland, Oregon, or the entire western United States knew. Standing outside the workshop of Harris Hands, positioned in the narrow alley beside the building where the shadow was deep and the angle gave a clear line of sight through the side window, was something that was definitely not human. It stood 11 feet tall. Its armor was gold and ancient, covered in symbols that had not been written anywhere in the known galaxy for over 3,000 years. Its eyes glowed with a green light that was not a reflection of anything in the alley. It moved with absolute stillness, the kind of stillness that only comes from 10,000 years of absolute discipline. The Dragon Emperor Verk-Oran, supreme ruler of the Orath Eternal Empire, commander of 47 star systems, the being that 7 separate civilizations had declared to be a living god, was pressed against the side of a repair shop in Portland, Oregon, watching a human fix his granddaughter's toy. And he had not moved in 23 minutes. Verk-Oran had not planned to be in Portland. He had not planned to be on Earth at all. His visit was what the imperial court called an unannounced inspection, a tradition among Orath emperors that stretched back thousands of years. When an emperor wanted to truly understand people, a world, a civilization, he did not arrive with ceremony. He did not arrive with warships and announcements and formal delegations. He arrived quietly. He walked among them. He watched. Verk had done this with 17 different civilizations across his 10,000-year reign. He had walked through the markets of the Saurian homeworld disguised as a merchant. He had sat in the taverns of the Velthari colony ships, listening to soldiers talk honestly about war. He had spent 3 weeks living as an ordinary laborer on the Drekken mining worlds. He believed that you could not understand people from above. You had to stand among them. Earth had been on his personal inspection list for several years. Since first contact, since the initial diplomatic exchanges, since his advisors had begun delivering their formal reports on humanity, reports that were, frankly, contradictory and confusing in ways that no other civilization had ever managed to be. Humanity was, according to imperial assessment, simultaneously the most violent and the most compassionate species in the known galaxy. The data supported both conclusions equally. Humans had fought more wars against their own kind than any other species in recorded galactic history. And yet humans had also produced more charitable organizations, more voluntary aid systems, more instances of self-sacrifice for strangers than any other species in the same records. The Orath imperial analysts could not reconcile these two facts. They had produced a report that essentially concluded, humans are unpredictable and should be monitored carefully. Verk found this report unsatisfying, so he came to see for himself. He had been on Earth for 11 days when the incident with his granddaughter occurred. Syrah, the small golden hatchling now sitting in that Portland workshop watching a human work, was the youngest daughter of Verk's eldest son. She had accompanied her father on a diplomatic mission to the Pacific Northwest Human-Orath Cultural Exchange Program. It was her first time on Earth. She had, in the way of very young children across all species, immediately wandered away from her father's supervision during a public market visit that morning. She had also, in the process, dropped her toy. The mechanical dragon was not just any toy. It had been built by imperial craftsmen specifically for Syrah. It was the only one of its kind in existence. Syrah had named it Kale. She carried Kale everywhere. When she had dropped him on the stone market floor and his wing had snapped, she had cried out in a tone so sharp and so distressed that it had cut through 3 blocks of street noise and reached her grandfather's ears instantly. Verk had found her quickly. He had seen the broken toy. He had seen his granddaughter's devastation. He had also seen the look of cold indifference on the faces of the two Orath guards who stood nearby. To them, it was a toy. It could be replaced. The child would adjust. There were more important matters. Verk said nothing to the guards. But something tightened in him. He had watched Syrah wander. He had let her wander, staying far back, watching to see how she navigated this human world. And he had followed at a distance when she pushed open the door of a small repair shop. He had not expected the human to stop working immediately. He had not expected the human to get down on one knee. He had not expected those words. "Let me take a look. I think we can save it." 7 words. Verk had stood outside that window for 23 minutes now. He had watched Caleb Harris work on Kale with a focus and care that the Emperor recognized instantly, because it was the same focus and care that the greatest Orath craftsmen brought to their most sacred work. This man was not doing a job. He was doing something that mattered to him. That distinction, that difference, hit Verk Oron like nothing had hit him in centuries. Inside the workshop, Caleb was deep in the work now. He had managed to free the Sea's tail mechanism using a technique he had developed for antique clockwork, a precise sequence of micro-releases that relieved pressure on the jammed components without forcing anything. It had taken 40 minutes of careful, patient work. The tail now moved perfectly. 12 fluid joints, each one responding exactly as designed. Syrah had made a sound when she saw it move. Not a word. Just a sound, a small ascending musical note, the kind that Caleb's pamphlet had described as an expression of hope in young Orath children. He smiled at her without looking up from the bench. "Almost," he said quietly. "Almost." The broken wing was the harder problem. The primary joint had not just snapped. It had sheared at a precise stress point, which told Caleb that this was an engineering design issue in the original build, a weak point that would have broken eventually no matter what. Fixing the break was not enough. He needed to redesign the joint slightly to eliminate the stress point, or it would break again. He studied the alloy for a long time. It was unlike anything in his material catalog. Stronger than titanium, lighter than aluminum, with a crystalline structure that his magnifying glass revealed as almost impossibly fine. He could not weld it with his standard equipment. He sat back. He thought. Then he opened the cabinet above his bench, where he kept his most unusual materials, things given to him over the years by alien customers who had needed parts fabricated or repairs, done with non-standard materials. He had small samples of a dozen different alien alloys, carefully labeled. He found what he was looking for, a small piece of Velthari phase-bonding compound, given to him 2 years ago by the Velthari family down the street in exchange for fixing their translation device. He had never used it because he had never needed it. He needed it now. Phase-bonding compound worked differently from any earth welding technique. Instead of fusing materials at high temperature, it created a molecular bond at room temperature when applied correctly, producing a joint that was actually stronger than the surrounding material. Caleb had read about it. He had never done it. He read the small handwritten instruction card that the Velthari neighbor had included with the sample. He read it 3 times. Then he very carefully, very precisely, applied the compound to the broken wing joint. He held the pieces together. He counted to 60. He released. The wing held. He tested it gently. It held. He tested it with slightly more pressure. Still held. The joint was solid. Better than solid when he examined it under the magnifying glass. The bond was seamless. It looked original. He tested the full wing mechanism. It moved. Both wings moved, articulating smoothly, the way they were designed to move. The gemstone eyes lit up as the mechanism engaged, casting two tiny points of amber light across the workbench. And the little sound that Sirah made in that moment was not just a note. It was a full chord. A sound of pure, overwhelming joy that resonated at a frequency Caleb felt more in his chest than he heard with his ears. The hatchling rushed forward, her small golden claws reaching for Kale, and Caleb held the toy out to her with both hands, carefully, respectfully. She took it. She held it against her chest with both arms wrapped around it. Then she looked up at Caleb, and she did something that no Orath child had ever been formally documented doing with a human. She pressed her forehead gently against his. It was the Orath gesture of deepest personal gratitude, the gesture reserved for family, for those who had done something so significant that ordinary thanks could not contain it. Caleb did not know what it meant. He just felt, somehow, that it was something important. He reached up slowly and rested his hand gently on the top of her small golden head. "You're welcome, little one," he said softly. Outside in the alley, the dragon emperor Verk-Oran, who had not shed a tear in over 400 years, felt something move behind his eyes that he could not immediately explain. 3 days passed. Caleb went back to his normal life. The Mustang restoration, a broken microwave belonging to an elderly woman on Burnside Street, a child's electric train set that had stopped running. Normal days. Good days. He thought about the little golden hatchling sometimes. He hoped she was doing well. He hoped Kale was still working. On the morning of the 4th day, Caleb arrived at his workshop to find something outside the door. It was a box. Not a delivery box. Not a cardboard shipping container. A box made from some dark, beautiful material that looked like polished stone, but weighed almost nothing. Its surface was covered in raised symbols that Caleb did not recognize. It was sealed with a clasp made from the same golden alloy as Sirah's toy. There was no note in any language Caleb could read. He brought it inside. He set it on his bench. He studied it for a long time. Then he opened it. Inside, resting on material that looked like dark silk, were 3 things. The first was a set of tools. 12 instruments, each one a masterwork of alien engineering, each one designed for work at the microscopic level, with materials that Earth technology could not currently process. They were the finest repair tools that Caleb had ever seen or imagined. Tools that would allow him to fix things he currently could not fix, to help people he currently could not help. The second was a small card. Written on it, in English, in precise, careful handwriting, were these words: "For the one who understands the real value of this world." Caleb stared at that line for a very long time. His grandfather's words. Exactly his grandfather's words. Word for word. The phrase that had shaped his entire life. The phrase that no one outside his own memory could possibly know. His hands were not entirely steady when he picked up the third item. It was a small medallion. Golden, heavy, covered on one side with the same symbols as the box. On the other side, a single image had been engraved with extraordinary precision. It showed a human figure kneeling on a workshop floor, holding a toy. And in the background, barely visible, watching from the shadows, a massive armored figure with ancient eyes. Caleb sat down on his workshop stool. He sat there for a long time. He thought about everything he knew and everything he did not know. He thought about the little hatchling. He thought about the toy. He thought about the moment she had pressed her forehead against his, and how it had felt like something enormous was happening in a very quiet way. He thought about his grandfather. He did not fully understand what had happened. He did not know who had sent this box or how they had known those words. He did not know what the medallion meant or what the symbols said. but he understood the tools. He picked up the first one, turned it over in his hands, felt its perfect weight and balance. Then he set it down carefully next to his old tools. And he went back to work. Because that was what Caleb Harris did. He fixed things. Meanwhile, in a chamber aboard an Orath Imperial vessel in high Earth orbit, Emperor Verk Oron stood before his senior council and delivered a formal assessment of humanity that would be entered into Imperial records and distributed to all 47 star systems under Orath governance. His advisors expected the standard report. Cautious, analytical, recommendations for continued monitoring. What they received instead was 3 words. 3 words that had never appeared in any Imperial assessment of any civilization in 10,000 years of Orath history. They are worthy. No elaboration. No qualifications. No footnotes. Just those 3 words. The council exchanged glances. They looked at their emperor. They waited for more. Verk Oron looked back at them with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of empires. A man stopped everything he was doing, the emperor said quietly, to fix a child's toy. Not for reward. Not for recognition. Simply because a child was crying and he could help. He paused. If that is what humans are, he said, then there is nothing in this galaxy I fear from them, and nothing I would not do for them. He dismissed the council. And somewhere far below, in a small workshop in Portland, Oregon, Caleb Harris picked up a brand new alien tool and got back to work. Here is the thing that nobody in this story said out loud. The Emperor already knew those words. His granddaughter had told him, in Orath, in the musical tone language of infant dragons, what the human had said to her. Emphasis, let me take a look. I think we can save it, emphasis. Verk had spent 3 days finding out where those words came from. He had traced them back to a grandfather in Manchester, England, a man who had died 15 years ago, a man who had passed those words to his grandson like a gift, wrapped in something invisible. The Emperor had put those words on the card because he wanted Caleb to know, without being able to fully explain how, that what he carried inside him had been seen. Truly seen. If this opened your eyes to what small acts of kindness can actually mean, stay right here, because the next story goes even deeper. Let us bring it all together. Caleb Harris was not a hero in the traditional sense. He had no weapons, no special powers, no grand mission. He was a mechanic in Portland who believed that broken things deserved care. That belief, passed down from a grandfather in Manchester, turned out to be the most powerful thing a human being had shown an immortal emperor in 10,000 years of watching civilizations rise and fall. The second thing to take away is this. You never know who is watching when you choose kindness. You never know the weight of what you do when no reward is expected and no audience is assumed. And the third thing, the one that matters most, is that worthy is not a word given to armies or governments or technologies. It is given to a person who gets down on one knee for a crying child. Now we want to hear from you. Drop your answer in the comments below. What would you have done if you found that box outside your door? If you want more stories like this one, stories that remind you what humanity is actually capable of, hit subscribe right now. We upload every single week. And when you are ready, the next story is already waiting for you.